Coming up on episode 208 of Wheel Bearings, we've got a lot of stuff to drive. The Audi SQ7, Lamborghini Urus, the 1957 Mercedes-Benz 300 SL, the Toyota Sienna, the Hyundai Santa Cruz, the Nissan Frontier, the 2022 Jeep Wagoneer and Grand Wagoneer. We also talk about the new Lamborghini Countach, the return of the Acura Integra, and the possibility of a Nissan compact electric pickup, all coming up next. Did you know you can support Wheel Bearings directly? Head to patreon.com/wheelbearingsmedia and you can become a patron today. Your contributions will help fund the platforms and tools we use to bring the podcast to you. And exclusives and improvements are already on the way thanks to your generosity. So if you want to be part of an automotive podcast like no other, head to patreon.com/wheelbearingsmedia. This is episode 208 of Wheel Bearings. I'm Sam Abuel-Samad from Guidehouse Insights.
I am Nicole Wakeland, and this week we'll go with Auto Vital.
And I am Roberto Baldwin from Engadget.
And this week I am going to start things off because Robbie is still waking up from his first night back on the stage last night, and Nicole is digging up some information about the cars that she drove. So this week I've been driving the
just throw us right under the bus, Sam.
I think I just did.
Yeah, exactly.
I've been driving a 2020 Audi SQ7 that remarkably is still in the press fleet after almost 2 years now, and it's only got about 5,300 miles on it. So yeah, the SQ7 is I don't know if they sell an RSQ7 here in North America. I don't think they do. I think they offer one in Europe, but this is the higher performance version of Audi's 3-row crossover SUV thing, which is really more kind of wagonish than kind of in between crossover and wagon, because it's not that tall, especially after what we drove earlier this week that Nicole and I will talk about later. It actually doesn't feel that big, and so. When I say 3-row, it's nominally 3-row. It has a couple of extra seats at the back behind the second row, but they're certainly not big enough for almost any adults. I think kids are probably not going to be that comfortable back there in that third row anyway. But what makes the SQ7 special is it has a twin turbocharged 4-liter V8 with 500 horsepower. And it'll do 0 to 60 in under 4 seconds, and it has big alloy wheels and big tires, and it actually drives remarkably well for what it is. It doesn't feel like a 5,000 pound plus vehicle. It's quite nice to drive. It's got fantastic seats in it. If you've driven, if you've checked out any recent Audis in the last, 2-3 years, you'll be quite familiar with the current generation of the MMI infotainment system, which Audi has moved away from their MMI control knob, moved to a dual touchscreen layout. So you've got a touchscreen at the top of the center stack. It's not the stand-up tablet type touchscreens that we see on a lot of vehicles today. It's more integrated into the dash. That's where you'll find the infotainment stuff. And then down below at the bottom of the stack is a second touchscreen, which is primarily for things like the climate control. I prefer to have, especially the climate control with physical knobs. I like to, if I want to change the fan speed, I like to just give it a quick twist, or same with the temperature. This one works okay. One of the unique things about Audi's approach to touchscreens is that they have haptic feedback. So you actually and you actually can't just tap on the screen like you typically do on a glass touchscreen. You actually have to press on it. So it's kind of like pressing a physical button, except that there's no contours there. So you still have to look at it, but you press and you feel a click when you do that. So it's somewhat like the former home buttons that Apple had on the iPhones, or actually on their current touchpads on their laptops, where it doesn't actually move, but it has a haptic feedback that feels like it's clicking. It works fine. It's responsive. There was no lagginess to the system. Certainly no lagginess to the powertrain in this thing. 500 horsepower was fantastic. But even though this thing sounds great, like as soon as I fired it up, I picked it up from the airport on Wednesday morning after returning from New York City. As soon as you fire it up, the quad exhaust pipes, it sounds like a high performance V8. It's got a nice rumble to it. But I remember the first performance Audi I ever drove back in about 2007 or 8, which was an RS4 convertible. And this one still had the old naturally aspirated flat plane crank 4.2 liter V8, which was the same engine that was in the first generation R8. And that engine, that thing would rev to over 8,000 RPM. It was a classic, flat plane crank V8. It sounded more like a Ferrari than a rumbling American V8. This has the SQ7 has some of the flavor of a typical American V8 in terms of its sound, but it doesn't have the it's smoother. It doesn't have the rumbling, kind of that kind of that pulse, that slight low frequency vibration that you get in like a Chevy small block or a Ford Coyote V8. So it's a lovely vehicle. It's also very expensive.
How expensive is it?
This particular one, including delivery, and keep in mind this is a 1990 model, so I think the prices are actually up slightly from this, but this one was $99,390, including delivery. And it doesn't have all of the available options on it. It has a lot of options, but not everything. It does have the executive package, the driver assistance package, the heads-up display, the dual-pane glass sunroof, the Bang & Olufsen audio system, which is $5,000. Sounds very good. $5,000 good? But it's good. It's good. Laser headlight package. One interesting detail I noticed when I was photographing it on the front grill, redundant. On the grill, there are two what look very similar to the devices that were on the front of that Mercedes EQS that you recently drove, Robbie, where the EQS has laser or LiDAR sensors, or a LiDAR sensor and a dummy LiDAR sensor. This one appears to have the exact same thing on the grille. It looks exactly like the Vallejo Scala LiDAR sensor that Mercedes is using, except it's not a LiDAR sensor. When this was originally developed a few years back, and it came out around the time that the current generation Audi A8 came out, which launched it was one of the first vehicles to launch with LiDAR and using that same LiDAR sensor. And Audi had plans to introduce a traffic jam pilot system, a level 3 partially automated system, which they equipped the cars with the sensors, but they never released the software for it because there was no regulatory framework yet, and they couldn't figure out if it was legal or not, or where it would be legal. And so in Europe, they actually built these with a LiDAR sensor. So there's just like on the EQS, there's two of them, one on either side of the Audi badge, the 4-ring badge in the grille. And I believe that on the European versions, on the one side was a LiDAR, the other side was a radar sensor that had a cover on it that looked exactly like the LiDAR, for the same reasons that Mercedes used a dummy to give it that symmetry, because you don't want a sensor sitting on just one side of your grille.
It was camouflaged radar.
I believe. Yeah, so I believe on one side, they had the radar on one side, the LiDAR on the other side. Since they never released the SQ7 with the LiDAR in North America, it has a radar sensor that looks like a LiDAR sensor, and then a dummy on the other side. So
because you must have balance.
There's that.
Things must be balanced and equal, and otherwise your car will tip to one side. It's a mess.
What was it? The Discovery remember when Discovery came out and the rear of the car was definitely not symmetrical, and everyone made fun of the rear of the Discovery when the Land Rover Discovery. So I think everyone's like, well, we don't want to be that.
Yeah, or the Nissan Cube.
Oh, yeah.
The Nissan Cube was also asymmetrical because it had the glass that wrapped around one C-pillar at the back and from the side to the back. So, yeah, I guess, symmetry is a weird thing. Symmetry adds character, but not everybody likes character, apparently. So there's that.
Character.
So the SQ7, if you're looking for a high performance SUV that not quite as high performance as, say, an Audi X5M or X6M, or a Mercedes AMG. I guess this would be equivalent to the GLE, maybe somewhere between the GLE and the GLS. It's not quite as high performance as those. That would be the RSQ7, which we don't get here, I don't think. But it's if you're a fan of Audi and you want something in that that kind of performance range, I think this is a great option to take a look at. And it's a really attractive big wagon. So it looks good. It drives really well. The ride quality is very good, considering the size of the wheels and tires on it. So I'm enjoying it.
So what's your verdict?
Nicole.
Well, I have a question for you. That haptic screen, would you rather have a screen with a haptic feedback if you could pick or choose? Pro haptic feedback or against it? Like, did you like it or did you I had to get used to this?
It doesn't bother me. I think the thing that takes more getting used to, I think Cadillac has in the past had a haptic screen with their infotainment system, but in that case, it was still just a tap to click to
right.
You just tap it. You don't actually have to press it. What's different about this and what takes getting used to is the fact that you actually have to press the screen. Yeah, like pressing a button, as opposed to just tapping it and getting some feedback.
I kind of like the idea, because I find so often I think I've tapped the screen, and sometimes you're like, oh wait, I didn't tap that. Then you tap it again, and if the screen's had if there's been like a half a second of lag, you're like, oh, now I tapped it twice. Now I've done something I didn't want to do. So I kind of like the idea that it's like, it's giving me some feedback. I have in fact touched that button.
You did the thing you thought you did.
So
you did the thing you thought you did before you did the thing you thought you did again. Yeah. Cool.
And there's less likelihood that you're going to get frustrated. If you thought you tapped it and nothing happens. Yeah. If you don't feel the feedback, then it hasn't registered.
You missed.
Then I think it's probably actually a good thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Of course, it also means that you're going to have probably even more prominent fingerprints on the screen
because you're really pressing instead of just
microfiber cloth in the center console.
I've given up on the screens. Like they're covered with fingerprints, and I'm like, yep. I've given up. It's just exactly.
It's just a fact of life.
Man. Just your screen will be covered with fingerprints 30 seconds after you clean it. Okay, so I had only one car that I drove that was in my driveway this week, and that was the 2021 Toyota Sienna Limited in a color that I'm not a fan of, Sunset Bronze Mica, which is kind of a shiny brownish color. And it's not an attractive color. I don't like it. My daughter and husband both immediately thought it looked like baby poop. So, I feel like you have enough poop in your life. You don't need it in your car, too, when you have little kids. But whatever. So not a fan of the color. But so it's new this year. They did a lot with the Sienna. There's a hybrid engine. It's a 2.5-liter four-cylinder. Total is 245 horsepower and 176 pound-feet of torque. It moves. I mean, it's good. I like that hybrids now, like there was a time when hybrid engines felt like hybrids. You always knew you were in a hybrid. It always just felt like you would hit the gas and you're like, are we going to go? Is it off? Or is it just hybriding because I don't feel anything happening? This is responsive. Like you move. Toyota does a good hybrid engine and this one is no exception. It's got that roomy interior with cubbies galore. Like your family, you want to have 8,000 cup holders, a spot for every last random McDonald's toy and the rock the kids picked up at the park, and that flower that has to be protected in a cup holder till you get home. And it has all of that. So it has all the features that you want a minivan to have, and it's comfortable. You're driving a lot with kids, you're running around, and it's a tiring day. And especially, I have these memories when the girls were little. My biceps were like stronger than they ever were because you're constantly lifting kids in and out of a car. So you're moving a lot and lifting a lot. You're lifting groceries. It's nice to just sit down in a nice, big, comfy chair that is your driver's seat and just sort of relax. And that's exactly what you get in the Sienna. It's a good option. And the fuel economy with the hybrid, which is a big deal, it is actually, this is the most even fuel economy on the planet. 36 city, 36 highway. So the combined is in fact 36.
36?
36. I know, right? Ooh. That's really higher math, but good job, Sam. So
that's why I have an engineering degree.
Exactly. See, totally worth it. You figured that out like that. I was averaging, actually, I averaged a little higher. I was averaging like more towards 38. Was just kind of cruising along. So it lived up to that and then some, which I feel like is a good thing, because the other thing you worry about when you are family is the budget's tight, because there's so much going on with the kids and so many things pop up. It's not, it can be tough to budget when you have kids. And I feel like this is a good choice from that point of view. From the not good point of view for budget.
Especially considering that, this is not an inexpensive vehicle.
That's what I was going to say. From the not budgety point of view, this one, which again was the limited, it has, it has a leather interior. It has a 12-speaker JBL audio system with a subwoofer and an amplifier. So it's got some stuff in it. And this total price on the one in my driveway is $50,010.
That's a lot of scratch for dragging your kids around town, so they can spill their Happy Meals everywhere.
It's a lot of scratch. And it also, there's the rear seat entertainment is included in there, which is $1,400, which, bumps the price up a bit. But who needs that? Does anybody really need a rear seat entertainment screen where now you have like tablets that are like super durable for kids and then you can take them with you wherever you go? I don't even think I would buy one now. Would you get one if your kids were little?
Right now, probably not. Just because, as you said, everybody's got mobile devices, but 15 years ago?
Yeah.
But absolutely.
But 15 years ago, yeah. But in 2021, I can't actually see. I never really thought about it. I can't actually see spending $1,415 on a rear seat entertainment system when you probably already have devices that your kids own that will do the job.
Yeah, that you have like a $500 tablet, or even not even that. You can have like $100-something tablet.
Right. They make like kid-friendly tablets too that are super cheap and all like kinds of durables. You can practically like throw them out of the window and they'll just bounce right along and you can pick them up. Yeah. Not that you should be letting your kids throw anything out of the windows, but it happens.
If they do.
If they do. Kids are kids.
Those rascals.
Those rascally little things. So that's the Toyota Sienna. I like this car. I really like it a lot. I have never personally owned a minivan. I made it through all of my little kid mom years without a minivan because I never liked the sort of aura of you're a mom in a minivan. I'm like, no, I can't be that. I can be a mom. I can have, food on my shirt because my kids got food on me. I can have my hair in a ponytail and look like a grub, but I am not driving a minivan. But if I were...
Minivans are so much better, though.
They are better. But
they're
still...
so much
absolutely.
Better.
But would you do... I did SUVs. I had like
but they're better
mid-size.
Than SUVs.
Yeah, but they're not...
The door opens, slide. They're
more useful, but like cool factor. Is it cooler to drive any minivan or is it cooler to drive any SUV? If you're like, I cannot stomach the minivan life, SUVs are cooler.
SUVs definitely have that cool factor, but... If you're hauling that kid around, you got to load that kid into a car seat.
Yeah.
It's so much easier to do that
it's way
at the height of a minivan than it is in an SUV.
Well, and the big thing too is that I always found like every time you went somewhere with another, I'm going to the beach with another mom, and now we have 2 of us and 4 kids, so we need to have something with 3 rows of seating for sure. You can't get by in a 5-person SUV, but also kids love to go to the back. And in an SUV, they will just climb over the middle row and their feet hit the roof. Then you have these nice little scuff marks marks on your ceiling. If you have a minivan, especially if you have the pass-through, if you only got like a captain's chairs, they will actually walk, over the console between the two, but still, you take your wins, over the console into the back seat so you don't have these scuff marks on your ceiling.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say
exactly.
I guess it's 3 words: stow and go. That's it.
I know.
I have rented a minivan.
Yeah.
I have a very expensive Lamborghini in my driveway, and for the show and for a trip we're taking, I rented a minivan.
See?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not cool, but dang it, those things are useful.
Yeah, we're taking the dogs with us, and so I was like, well, we could get an SUV, but forget that. Let's get a minivan.
Minivan. See, they do the job.
You're nice and squishy, and they're the best. The best.
But to the pricing conversation,
yes.
If you don't need that rear seat entertainment system and all the other goodies, you still you can get the base Sienna LE starting at under around 35,000,
which makes it much more
for a front-wheel drive version.
And it still has most of the you lose the luxury stuff, but how much do you care about leather seats? How much do you care about the fancy? If you're truly on a budget, don't get the limited and pick a color other than sunset bronze mica, and it will look prettier sitting in your driveway.
You can get the ruby flare pearl.
Ruby, is that a color? Is that like bright red?
Ooh.
It is.
Ruby.
It's more like a burgundy red.
Weird.
It's a darker red.
They need to put more sports car colors on minivans.
Was that color?
Bright yellow.
You need a bright yellow.
Yeah.
You need Skittles colors. You need those those supercar colors.
There you go.
I always
it has to be
lime green.
Lime green, like a lime green minivan. That would be weirdly cool. Like I can't have my Lamborghini, but check out my minivan.
I always get excited when I see someone who's taken like a Honda Odyssey or Toyota Sienna or even an old Chevy Astro van, and they've like slammed it and put like nice wheels on it. I'm like, yeah. Because in the 90s, that was like a whole subgenre of car culture was the minivan with the 15-inch speakers in the back. Just you're like, that's my jam. Just open it up and boom, 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 boom. Anyway, minivans are dope.
Were the old mid-engine Toyota Previas popular for that sort of thing?
I feel like back then it was really the Astro van. And the
Astros, okay.
What was it? The Safari? What was it called?
Yeah, that was the GMC version.
The GMC Safari.
The GMC Safari, and the Ford Aerostar.
Yeah, that was sort of because it had that sort of cool wedgy look. It just
Yeah.
And they had that cool commercial, Chevy, Astro, and it drove around like Saturn or something. It was I've had the song for that commercial stuck in my brain.
I do not even remotely remember this commercial, but now you know what I'll be Googling as soon as we're done recording.
Yeah. There was someone I worked with who was a big Chevy Astro van fan. And I sent him that ad, and he'd never seen it before. And I'm like,
I don't ever remember that.
I'm like, this ad has been stuck in my brain since it came out.
For 30 years.
Yeah, it's like driving in space or something. I don't know. Good times.
Okay, so I
have a feeling a lot of that's going to come back in 2023 when the production ID Buzz arrives.
Oh
here.
yeah,
I think we're going to see a bunch of those done up that way.
That's going to be the cool van. I actually just had someone who asked me about minivans. Like, well, what? Oh wait, it was on the show. I've had 4 hours of sleep after after like a 20-hour day yesterday. So
I think that was in the questions last week.
It was in the questions. Like, hey, someone asked me about vans, and we told him.
Wait a minute. We just did that.
When did that happen? I'm glad.
Okay.
All
right.
Go back and take another quick cat nap while Nicole tells us about her rest of her
so I have 2 other vehicles to talk about. These were first drives that happened in the last week or so, and they're kind of compete, but kind of don't, depending on who you ask. I drove the 2022 Nissan Frontier, and I drove the 2022 Hyundai Santa Cruz. The Santa Cruz, you would say it's a compact pickup truck, but Hyundai would not. They call it a sport adventure vehicle. Sport adventure vehicle. I mean, you can
Hyundai
giggle, but
is so weird about things like that.
every automaker is.
Every automaker invents their own. I'm like, it's a compact truck, so call it what you will. It looks a lot like a compact pickup truck, but it has a really short bed. So it's even, I think it's going to be like more Maverick-like when the Maverick comes out, because the Maverick squishes everything down a little bit. But the Santa Cruz, I'll talk about that one first. They did a great job with this. It does have that very comfortable SUV ride and interior. You don't feel like you're in a rough little truck. It has pretty affordable pricing. It starts at only $23,990, so let's call it $24. It gets a nice big infotainment screen, Apple CarPlay, that kind of good stuff. You've got 2 different powertrains in there. There's a 2.5 liter 4-cylinder with 191 horsepower, and also a turbocharged that brings it up to 281. I think I would go for that turbocharged one, because 191 isn't a lot of horsepower for even a modestly sized sport adventure vehicle. I said it right. So I would go for that one. It gets good fuel economy. And you do have front wheel or all wheel drive, so you can pick, but it's all wheel drive. It's not 4-wheel drive. And I think that's probably the big differentiator between it right now and some of the other compact trucks out there. It has that light off-roady capability. You want to drive it on a sort of a rough road. You want to drive it off the, you're going up to the cabin. You've got to drive across this rock, muddy fairground. It's fair season everywhere. You're cool. But if you want to really, really go off-roading, probably not, because it's not a 4-wheel drive vehicle. And there's a little bit of a difference between those things. So, has good room for cargo, has good capacity for towing. It can tow up to 5,000 pounds. And it was a nice, comfortable ride. It's quiet, it's responsive. So it does a good balance of having that SUV inside with a little bit of truck, like, business in the front, party in the back. Just
party
a little bit of a party. Just a little bit of a party. A little party in the
party.
back.
It's
not a big party.
It's a get together. It's a get together with some good friends.
It's the Hyundai mullet.
It's the Hyundai. Oh my God. Hyundai's going to be like, thanks, guys. Appreciate that description. Yeah, it's the Hyundai mullet. But it's a good mullet. It's the mullet. You know what? The guy wearing that mullet he's just embracing it. And you're like, you do you, dude. That is an awesome mullet. So I really liked it. It does have
maybe instead of SAV, instead of sport activity vehicle, or compact truck, maybe that is the actual category we're talking about here is mullet trucks.
Mullet trucks.
Oh my God, that's an awesome description.
The new Maverick mullet truck.
Can we start writing that in all of our reviews, guys, going forward, mullet trucks, and make that a thing? I want that to be a thing. And they're like, someday someone will say, where did that come from? Right here.
Wheel Bearings Podcast.
Wheel Bearings Podcast. We brought that term to you. You're
Copyright
welcome.
2021.
So I like the Santa Cruz. I think it's a good truck. I think it's not the truck person's truck. It's more someone who just wants that little extra capability, a little versatility to tow, to put stuff in the back for your day to day. It makes your runs to Home Depot, to the garden center. It carries, come on guys, what does it carry well in the back?
Mulch.
Yes,
Bags
it carries
of
mulch in the back.
Yay.
So it does that. It has nice little sort of the way that the bed is made. There's plenty of ways for you to put 2x4s and plywood and stuff on it to create multi-level situations and partition things off. So I was a fan of the Santa Cruz overall. Literally drove the Santa Cruz the last 3 days of 1 week, went home for the weekend, and then drove the Frontier. The Frontier is a more trucky truck. In fact, they just call it a truck. Go figure. They have no...
Weirdos.
I know.
What's going on at Nissan? Come on,
totally
get together.
Non-creative names like compact pickup truck, whatever. We got a mullet and a sport adventure vehicle act over here. So this is the same, even though it's all new, it's not really, because they introduced the powertrains, I want to say for 2020, was it? I don't think it was this year. I feel like it was last
21.
So it was for 21.
It was last year. It was the 21.
Okay.
Truck.
So the powertrains are the same. So if you've driven a Frontier, you've already seen the powertrain, so you know how that is. That's nothing new. What they did is they've given a styling update, the safety features, the interior of the old Frontier. It was old, man. It was so dated. It felt so plastic, fantastic, and it was not a great interior. There was, you could say it has the capability, it has the power, it can do all the stuff that I want it to do, but do I really want to sit in this all day? New Frontier is really nice. They did a fantastic job upgrading the interior. The suspension system is very, very smooth. You drive over the potholes or over rough pavement, you're going to be totally fine. It has, they have the Pro X and the Pro 4X. So you got the Pro X, which is rear-wheel drive, or the Pro 4X, which is the four-wheel drive. But they get a combination of like skid plates and upgraded shocks and things to make it so you can legitimately go off-road in places you think you might not be able to. And they took us on a pretty good off-road course that had some, steep ups and downs. It had some rocky bits where the rocks sort of want to slip under your wheels and it still climbed right up. And they have a neat available off-road camera that it's really cool. It gives you a great view, but it automatically turns on if you're in 4-low. So it's like, if you don't think about it, you put it in 4-low and you're at low speeds, it comes on. So boom, you need 4-low. You probably want to see exactly what's around your vehicle. So that's kind of cool. I thought that was a neat little feature. So I liked it. You get an 8-inch infotainment screen, you get a halfway decent audio, you get a 9-inch screen on top trims, and they put in a premium 10-speaker Fender audio system. So you get all sorts of fancy when you move up the lineup. So I liked it. I think it's a good step forward, and it has the capability that you want. That's sort of like, Santa Cruz to Frontier. Santa Cruz is not about being a capable off-road crazy truck. The Frontier, you can do that if you want to. You can get that trim, or you can take it down a level and just make it kind of like your Santa Cruz and make it just a run around town and carry mulch truck. But I liked both of these. I think they did a good job on these two little trucks.
Cool. I'm always happy when Nissan does anything good right now, because there was a long time where they were just doing things okay, like good enough, and now I feel like they're really sort of coming out of the good enough phase and back into the good. And I will continue to say this, that it started with the Nissan Kicks, which I think is still a great little cheap, inexpensive vehicle.
I love the Kicks.
Everyone loves the Kicks.
But it gets some crap because it's not the most like. It's the Kicks. It's an entry-level, little crossover situation. And they're like, oh, well, it's not a super responsive engine. It's not aggressive. I'm like, dude, it's not a sports car.
That's not what it is. If you don't if you don't understand the market, then
it's. Yeah, I mean, the Kicks is not going after, the Nissan Z buyer. It's going after the people who in the past would have bought, a Versa or a Sentra.
Yeah.
It's after that market. People that can't, that either aren't interested in something sportier or can't afford it.
Right. So, I mean, I think they did really well with that, and I think they continue that with the Frontier, the updates that they did to this. Like I said, the engine didn't change. The powertrain's the same, so that's not different. So you've pretty much got that already. If you drove that, you know what it's like. But the improvements elsewhere in how well it handles and sort of the technical things they did to make it a more capable vehicle, and just the interior update alone, egads, it feels like an entirely new truck. If you were looking at a Frontier and you were thinking, I don't know, this just feels so old school and outdated, go drive the new one, because it's entirely different and you will be pleasantly surprised. It's genuinely competitive now with things like the Ranger in terms of the ride and the interior, and the Tacoma. Oh, right. It was so far behind before. Now it's brought itself back up.
It was so rental car, and that's why they ended up in. That's how I've rented a Frontier.
See, and it was a rental car no matter what you got. The nicest, fanciest one you could buy. You're like, I'm still in the rental car. Oh no, this is the top trim. Okay, doesn't feel like that anymore. Now that is completely shed that.
The previous generation Frontier debuted in 2004.
Good God,
17 years.
It did not. 2004, really?
Yeah. I'm looking at it right now. Wow. It launched in October 2004. It had some minor refreshes along the way. And don't forget, during the lifespan of the current generation Frontier, there was actually a Suzuki branded version of it that Nissan supplied to Suzuki, the Suzuki Equator. Remember that?
Really? Oh, wow. I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
I would have bought the Suzuki Equator.
That's why Suzuki's no longer in the U.S. market. Suzuki dropped out of the U.S. market 11 years ago in 2010. And
no one noticed.
Before that, there was a version of the current generation Frontier badged as a Suzuki.
That's bad. Oh, so see, Nissan, like you said, Roberto, it's making some good progress. Like this is it's worth not just saying like, okay, oh, good job. Okay, it's a nice job with your new truck. It's like, oh, nice job, Nissan. You stepped up your game. You're fixing it. You're actually making marked progress as you introduce new things and not just putting enough of a Band-Aid on it to make it look better. You're really genuinely uplifting some of these vehicles and making them better.
Yeah.
So would you say that the new Frontier, I mean, is it competitive in that mid-size truck class? Because you've got quite a few good choices in there now. You've got the Ranger, there's the Tacoma, the GMC Canyon, Chevy Colorado, and GMC Canyon. So there's like 4 pretty strong competitors.
Were you?
There.
Yeah. Well, I had to write something up about it in the Ranger, and there's certain things where it comes like, and the Rangers are pretty like capable off-road. That's the one you're going to go off-roading in for sure. You can do that. It's pretty competitive. Like when I was writing it up, I had to compare it to the Ranger, the Tacoma, and the Canyon. I actually had to do like these comparison write-ups, and it didn't win on all of them, but it wasn't like, of the slides that I did, one thing, the Frontier came out ahead and the other trucks came out ahead everywhere else. It was always close. It was always like 4 for one, 5 for the other. So it is genuinely competitive. And it sort of depends what you're comparing. Like, the Frontier has better infotainment from the get-go than the Ranger does. That's something. Does that matter to every buyer? Maybe, maybe not. But then the Ranger has a better assortment of standard safety features from the get-go, so you're giving and taking in one spot or another. But I do feel like it's competitive, and I think especially for the off-roading capability of this, people like to go off-road in their fun little trucks. And for the people who are looking at those trims, like the Tremor for the Ranger and, the Pro 4X in this one, this gives it a run for the money. It's really a capable truck, but it's still the interior upgrades on this make it truly feel like it's competitive with the rest of the segment.
Cool. Good job, Nissan.
Smartphones have gotten way more expensive over the past decade, and all it takes is one impact on a hard floor to make you wish you had spent a few bucks to put a case on it. Going online without ExpressVPN is like not having a case for your phone, and it only costs a few dollars a month. Nicole, Robbie, and I travel a lot for our work, and we spend a lot of time in hotels, coffee shops, airplanes, and of course the Delta Sky Club. Connecting to the Wi-Fi in any public places with shared Wi-Fi puts your data at risk because bad actors could be intercepting what you send and using it to steal from you. It only takes some cheap hardware to intercept Wi-Fi data, and even a smart preteen can do it. Hackers can make up to $1,000 per victim selling personal information on the dark web. ExpressVPN stops the bad guys by creating a secure, encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet. ExpressVPN uses state-of-the-art encryption that would take a supercomputer up to 1 billion years to crack. I have ExpressVPN on all my devices, including a MacBook Pro, Windows laptops and desktops, and Android and iOS phones and laptops, or tablets. When I want to be secure, I just launch the app, click once to connect, and my data is secure. As I said, I travel a lot for my work, and I have to connect to countless public Wi-Fi networks in many countries. I have ExpressVPN on all my connected devices so that whoever else is on the same network can't see any of my data. That's important because I often have to check banks, credit card accounts, and transmit client data that might be sensitive, as well as filing articles on news that might be under embargo. ExpressVPN protects all of it, and I've been paying for my own account for years. Secure your online data today by visiting expressvpn.com/wheelbearings. That's expressvpn.com/wheelbearings, and you can get an extra 4 months for free. expressvpn.com/wheelbearings. All right, Roberto.
Oh, yeah.
What have you been driving?
I've been driving some weird, crazy stuff this week. So let's start.
Something old and something new.
Yeah, it was something old and something new. So let's start with the new. I drove the Lamborghini Urus this week. This is the Lamborghini SUV, and I know people are like, oh, it's not really a Lamborghini, it's not this, it's not that. I can't believe they're making, the Lamborghini Urus is the best-selling Lamborghini ever, period. Hands down, you can't, it starts at like $220,000 because it's a Lamborghini, but it's also the cheapest Lamborghini you can buy.
Is that really the cheapest?
Yes, it's the best-selling.
Cheaper than a Huracan?
I think it's cheaper than the Huracan. I believe it is
At $220,000, it's the cheapest Lamborghini. That just makes me laugh.
Yeah,
like our cheap car is almost, is more than
it's a little bit. It's a little bit more than the Huracan.
Okay,
it's
still cheap.
It's a scooch more. So it's one of the least expensive Lamborghinis that you can buy. It is. I actually, when they were asking me what car I wanted to go full Lamborghini and get the Huracan. But I was driving from San Francisco down to Monterey. It's a 2-hour drive. There's traffic. There's this. There's that. There's whatever. And I got to Urus, and I've driven it before. I did the drive program for it, and I was like, oh. But then when I was driving down there, and I have a lot of stuff going on, and I realized I'm like, oh wait, I have massage seats, and every time I hit a bump in the road, I'm not being jostled about, and all these sort of niceties of an SUV, with the growl and the insanity, and character of a Lamborghini. And so would I buy, if I had the money and I was buying a Lamborghini, I would probably get the Huracan. But I understand the buyer for the Urus. I understand the person who's like, I want a Lamborghini. I've always wanted a Lamborghini. I would love to own a Lamborghini. I have children, or I have, my husband or my wife doesn't want to drive this type of vehicle. They don't want to be, they don't want to sit down 2 inches off the ground. They don't want to deal with scissor doors. They don't want to deal with all the sort of lifestyle that comes with a Lamborghini. So we're going to get the Urus, and we're going to have a grand old time. And you are going to have a grand old time because it has a twin turbo V8. It's a 4-liter, and it has 641 horsepower and 626 pound-feet of torque. So you're still getting.
That's a lot.
That's so much. It is a lot, and it has that even in the sort of eco mode. It's still like.
It has an eco mode.
Well, it's not. It's not. Well, it doesn't have eco mode, but it's the least. It's the least insane mode.
I wanted to say that the button
mode, maybe.
Comfort, normal, least insane, and then sport.
So it's the comfort mode. But even in comfort mode, it's like. Everything.
That's a pretty good imitation of the engine there. I'm impressed with that.
I've been driving it a lot. And I expected, just to be burning through fuel. I expected to be, okay, this thing's going to get 12 miles to the gallon or something insane. And let me find it. The EPA rated mileage is 12 city, 17 highway. Wow. I was getting 23.
Were you really?
I was driving on the freeway, so I drove all the way down and all the way back, and I was getting 23 miles per gallon, and I was just like, how is this even possible?
That's remarkable for a Lamborghini.
That's actually really impressive.
Yeah, that was insane. I was, I'm cruising at 70, 80 miles an hour. I got stuck in traffic
were you trying to hypermile it and let it coast? No, you were just driving like a normal guy.
Yeah, you're on the freeway. I'm sure as soon as I take it to the hills, I'm gonna pull that down to 10 miles per gallon. As soon as I start but just driving around, you're like, oh, we gotta take the Lamborghini on a trip. It's not going to siphon all the fuel or all the money out of your bank account on mileage. I was like, no. And then on the way there, I was 23 something. And on the way back, I'm like, okay, well, maybe it's sort of off. And on the way back, same thing. And I was like, huh, all right. It's like a 2-hour drive.
Since Lamborghini is part of the larger Volkswagen family, and in fact is technically owned by Audi, which means that this thing actually shares probably a lot of components with that SQ7 that's in my driveway. It
does. It is a fancy
that engine. It's basically the same engine, but boosted up with another 150 horsepower.
Turned up to 11. It has the infotainment system is branded Lamborghini, but it's definitely the MMI, which is good because if you ever, I don't know, a Lamborghini infotainment system, it's gotten better over the past few years, but supercar infotainment systems are just notoriously not that great. because that's not what you buy the car for.
Right, you're buying it for all the luxury and the power and the look at my cool car. You're like, infotainment, meh, no one can see that, who cares?
Like sometimes you can plug in your phone and you'll get CarPlay, but most times you won't. Like sometimes you're just like, okay, forget it. And so yeah, it has a sort of branded Lamborghini branded Audi MMI. It's got the dual screens, so your climate control is on the second screen, which is, like Sam, I like physical buttons for climate control, but it's fine. But everything in there is all designed around that Lamborghini brand. There's like little cages above all the little buttons. So I don't know why. So you don't
because it looks cool. Does it look cool, Roberto? The little cages above the buttons.
It does look cool.
So that's why you just answered your own question. It looks cool. Let's put that on there.
The start stop, the power. The turn it on. You have to lift up a little red gate like you're flying a jet. You like lift it up.
I always feel like those are like I watched too many movies in the 80s where everyone had to flip the little door up before you push the buttons to launch the missiles. I'm like, oh, it's like a missile launch button in a car.
Yeah,
that's exactly what it is.
We watched the Suicide Squad last weekend, and that happened when they had to dispose of one of the members of the team when they weren't doing what they were supposed to.
Oh yeah,
you flip up the little button and
you flip up the little switch, and you are serious. Whatever the button does underneath that little cover, whatever it does, it's going to be impressive.
Yeah, and that's what that's what Lamborghini's going for. It's a Lamborghini, and also it's also like the typical Lamborghini where there's no drive. You have to use the shifters to put it into gear. So the first time you get into it, you turn it on, and you're like, oh, there's like a button for park, and then you pull a thing back for reverse, but to go forward, you have to shift the right paddle. And then and you're still in automatic. You can do paddle shift, manual, but you had to go forward. You got to boop, and I had to drop it off with the valets, and I forgot to tell them. So I don't know. I'm sure they've probably figured it out because it's Monterey Car Week, and at that point, they were.
The valets during Monterey Car Week probably have to go through a training process for all of these
super cars,
different
for all
crazy
the possible
cars that
permutations and combinations of how you have to drive a car. Yeah.
This is how you get in and out of McLaren. This is how you turn on a Ferrari. These are
how these doors open. This is how this steering wheel moves.
No matter where you think Audi put the start-stop button, they've moved it. Stuff like that.
They've moved it.
You're looking for the Porsche. It's on the other side. Look on the other side. I drove it down for Monterey Car Week. I really liked the car. I think it's I understand why people buy it. I understand why Lamborghini made it. I remember during the drive program, I walked over to somebody from Lamborghini and said, "You're going to sell so many of these," and they have, and that's it's like people getting angry.
Do we know how many? Sam, I feel like you're the numbers guy. You know all these numbers, Sam. Come on, Sam. You always have numbers at the ready. How many have they sold? If you could see his face right now, guys, he's like, oh gosh, I don't have that one ready. She put me on the spot.
They had like a little event.
Lamborghini doesn't. They don't usually get included in the monthly sales reports, so I'm not sure. So I've got to look it up.
Okay, I'll let you off the hook for this one. I did ask you to have a weird number at the ready.
But it's not surprising that the Urus is the top selling Lamborghini, because the same is true over at Porsche, where ever since the Cayenne was introduced, it's been the best selling Porsche. Yeah, so I would expect nothing less.
And people who get angry at those vehicles for whatever reason, those vehicles mean that you can at Porsche they can make 50,000 different variants of the 911, and over at Lamborghini that gives selling a lot of Uruses to folks who want the Lamborghini, name and power, but not the, weird sitting down position and jostled kidneys. But that allows them to make, 1,000 variants of the Huracan and 1,000 variants of the Aventador and, a brand new Countach, all these weird little things. They get paid for by these SUVs from these performance brands. So, so don't hate on the Urus or the Cayenne because later on you're going to see something cool from those automakers because they can sell the Urus and the Cayenne.
And that's kind of the case with all of them. Like people get on an automaker for things that they produce that they don't really feel are like cool and slick and exciting and, living up to their performance heritage or whatever. I'm like, yeah, but sometimes you have to produce cars that actually make some money to let you produce the cool, slick performance thing that's, frankly, batshit crazy. You need some money from somewhere. And maybe that run-of-the-mill car for them, for their lineup, that might be what does it. So back off. Give them a break.
let people buy the car you don't think is cool so the automaker can make the cool thing that you like.
Exactly. It's all about balance, people.
So, the circle of life.
Circle of life.
And then I drove something very old and sort of is like, I guess, one of those bucket list things. I drove a 1957 Mercedes 300 SL Roadster.
Wow.
If you the 50s SL, I think everyone knows the Gullwing. The Gullwing is the official favorite car of every human. If you ask people who aren't really even into cars and you say, "Oh, what about that Mercedes?" "Oh yeah, that's my favorite car."
That's the best.
It is the official favorite car of non-car people. It's like the second or third official favorite car of car people. So I got to drive the Roadster version of it, and it was outstanding. It was wonderful, and it's also a nice reminder of just how far car technology has come. Because especially since about the mid 80s, things started getting a bit better. Like when it comes to like stopping and turning and
the basics.
The basics, suspension. And before that, it was just like, okay, here's 4 tires and a stick with a wheel at the end of it connected to those tires, and we threw an engine in there, and there's an idea of brakes. We're just going to shove those on 4 tires.
An idea of brakes.
And let's
There's
just go for it.
There's a hint of stopping power.
A hint of stopping. It was great. It doesn't have any of the things that you expect from, a modern car. So it has the giant steering wheel because it doesn't have power steering. It had drum brakes, so you had to anticipate braking far more than you would on a modern vehicle. It's just like, oh dear, I think that guy may be doing something. And then he starts slowing down. That's the sort of. But yeah, it has a 4-speed manual transmission, which of course I was a big fan of. This vehicle had a whopping 240 horsepower. Which, 1957, that's a lot of horsepower.
I was going to say, you got to qualify it for the year it's in. Right now you're going, okay, but 1957.
Yeah,
that's
1957.
A lot.
That's a lot of horsepower.
That's a lot of horses.
From a 3-liter straight 6. So yeah, that's it sounded great. It felt great. It doesn't have stalks. They're inside this. So you have the steering wheel, and then inside the steering wheel is like a concentric circle, and it's 3/4 of the star, of the Mercedes star. That is what you use for the indicator lights. So while you're driving, you turn this inner circle left or right for the little blinkers to come on.
How hard was that to do? Is that totally awkward?
Well, when you do it, it's fine. The problem is like every time you come up to an intersection, you have to turn. You have that muscle memory of every single car ever, and you're reaching out there for that stock that's not there.
It doesn't exist. Yeah, just flailing your arms randomly in the front seat.
Flailing everything. And I left it on once, and it doesn't have like left-right indicators. It has a little light at the top of like sort of a Christmas tree of lights, and it just blinks red. And so the gentleman was like, "Hey, it doesn't auto turn off," which I should know that because I've owned cars where it doesn't automatically turn off. And I forgot, and I'm just driving along because I'm just having the best day ever, and I'm trying to make a video of this car, and I can't because I'm just like so happy that I'm driving this car, and then I see this little red light flashing. I'm like, oh God, what did I do to this car? What? Oh my God! How much is it? And then I
broke it.
And then I asked the gentleman, "How much is this car?" He's like, "Oh, like 1.2 million." I'm like, "Oh,
sure." So no worries there.
No worries. And then I'm like,
it's a bargain compared to a Gullwing.
Yeah. The Gullwing. The Gullwing is the Gullwing. That's something that's always going to be, again, everyone's favorite car. When you show it, you're like, oh, what do you want? Oh, and a Gullwing. I mean, everyone who's kind of into cars, not even into cars, they know that Gullwing. I think it's the official everyone favorite car. But that Roadster was just so nice. It was just this pure mechanical driving experience. The gears are a little bit further away than you anticipate. So the first couple times I kept like going from second into like some sort of mystery third. I'm like, oh, gotta go a little bit further over, like
mystery third.
Going into
where am I?
Yeah, 2.5 gear. I'm trying to remember what else is it. It's all like sort of chrome inside, and it has a teeny tiny little mirror. Like mirrors were like such an afterthought in the 50s. They're like, just throw something. You know what? I have this compact with a mirror in it. I'm just gonna pop that out and then shove it in the car, and that'll be good.
It'll be fine.
That's fine. That's fine. So yeah, it has it has a little that sort of passenger or driver's side mirror, and I don't. It's in the it's above in front of the windshield. So if you get in the car and you haven't adjusted it, you're like, eh. I think there is an adjustment, but I didn't want to mess with anything.
Are you telling us? Were you just afraid I'm going to adjust this and like break off this mirror, and it's going to cost you $25,000 to get a new one on there?
Yeah. It's funny because I asked the gentleman, I'm like, when you have this, when you let journalists drive it, do you have to like replace the clutch? Because not every journalist drives a manual transmission, but not every journalist feels comfortable enough to say, you know what, I'm not very good at this, which is unfortunate, because you should just be upfront about what you're good at and what you're bad at. It's easy. It's very important as a journalist or just as a human when they say, hey, what's your track experience? If you've only been on the track once, say once. Don't be like, I'm good.
I've been at 2 different track events where somebody in the first lap of a presumably new-ish OEM car didn't really know how to drive a stick and brought it back after 1 lap on the track smoking.
Yeah.
Like one of them seized up to the point that they had to just like, we will leave it. When the event clears, we're going to bring a flatbed in here because we literally cannot move this car.
Oh my, yeah. So if you don't know how to drive a manual, no shame in that, because no one sells manuals. So how are these parents going to teach their kids how to drive a manual if they've never driven a manual? And stop yelling at millennials for not knowing how to drive manuals, because no one's taught them, because you all bought automatic transmissions. It's your fault they don't know how to drive manuals, not theirs.
I didn't.
See, you're the good dad.
I bought manuals all along, and I taught both the kids how to do it.
See,
I tried. I couldn't get it. My one daughter was like, I don't want to learn, Mom. I refuse. And the other one tried, and we basically just stalled the car 852,000 times in the parking lot at the high school, to the point that it was like late, like after school, but the teachers are still there. Teacher's like, are you guys okay? I'm like, we're fine. We're trying to learn how to drive a manual. Thank you. Thank you so much.
See, you tried and you did it, but most of the people like I see like post those like, millennials don't know how to drive manuals. Those people haven't driven a manual since 1992. So
exactly.
And they definitely did not teach their children, or even attempt to teach their children, how to drive a manual. So shut your pie holes. Anyway,
exactly.
300 SL, 1957. I absolutely adored it. It was magical. It was a bucket list vehicle. I like to. I was talking to the gentleman. Whenever you drive an older car, you kind of forget like the heat that comes off the car. Like it doesn't like anything pre like 1980, early 80s. It's just there's always just heat coming up because the firewall is like at 2 centimeters thick. So everything that the car is doing is coming up.
There's no insulation there.
Yeah, there's zero insulation. It's nothing. It's just like engine, a thin sheet of like metal or aluminum. And then just you. Yeah. And that was great. He's like, yeah. I'm like, you kind of forget about that. He's like, yeah, it's really bad on the gull wing because now you're trapped inside. At least in this, you're like, it's open air. So this is much better.
Ventilation.
Yes.
So if you're a millionaire.
So was this one privately owned? Or did it belong to Mercedes?
I believe it belongs to Mercedes. They have a lot of vehicles in their fleet. They're the ones that let me drive the Simplex, the 1902 vehicle. I drove a Pagoda right after this, like a 1963.
Wow.
Pagoda, the 280 SL, which was also fun. It was an automatic transmission, but you could, both of these vehicles, you still feel, especially for that time, just that Mercedes luxury, like they were on brand, especially for that time. And like in 1957, that car, for 1957, I'm sure that car felt 10 years into the future. Sophia Loren drove one of these cars. Clark Gable drove one. So it's, yeah. I'll keep talking about the car, so I'll just stop.
So you kind of sort of liked it. Okay.
I kind of sort of liked it. If you have the opportunity, drive an old Roadster. It doesn't have to be a 300 SL. They cost so much money that it terrifies you to take a left turn. But
you might want something, a little, a little more affordable, just so you can get the experience of it. Find an old Austin Healey Sprite or an MGB or something.
Yeah. Just cruise around, have some fun.
All right. So, moving on then. This week, Nicole and I were both separately in New York City, and we were both there for the same purpose, but on different days, which was to drive the new Jeep Wagoneer and Grand Wagoneer. Nicole, why don't you go first? What did you think of Jeep's? Actually, their very first full size SUVs, because they've never built something this large before.
Well, I have to start by saying that you're talking about what cars you learned how to drive on. I learned how to drive a car on a 1982 Jeep Grand Wagoneer. That's actually what my parents had.
Oh, really?
So,
excellent.
Yeah. So I have and I took it to college, and you can fit a completely illegal number of your friends into that thing when you're an irresponsible college student, and it was brilliant. So I remember the old Wagoneer. And it was fabulous. Forward paneling on the side and all. The new one, the level of luxury in the Grand Wagoneer, because they have the Wagoneer and the Grand Wagoneer, and they've got two different powertrains, and the Grand Wagoneer comes with more standard, blow your mind luxury. You were talking about Roberto, when you said something looks very of the future, the interior of that Grand Wagoneer, holy bejeebus. There's so much tech, so much screen, so much there's so much, just so much everything. They even have a screen on the passenger side that is when you put a screen protector on your laptop so the guy next to you can't see what you're typing. If you are driving, you cannot see it. So It actually does work. So and you have access to some controls, but not all of them. But it's your own little screen. And when it's not in use, it just kind of looks like if you turn off an infotainment screen, you have that sort of piano black section of dashboard. It is unbelievably huge. It's big. It's really, really big. Also, it's really, really big.
How big is it?
It's big. It is big. And it's there's a Sherman tank, and then right below it, the Jeep Grand Wagoneer. They're right next to each other. Well, it's huge.
For reference, it's actually slots in between. It's a little bit bigger than a standard wheelbase Cadillac Escalade, but smaller than the long wheelbase, the suburban-sized Escalade.
Yes.
So it's in between those two.
So it is a big thing.
So it's about 4 inches longer than the base Escalade.
Yeah. So your average Escalade is smaller than this, and but the inside, I got to say, it rides beautifully. The inside truly is amazing. They had this one. I don't know what the color was called, Sam. It was like a light blue. I think it may have been called agave or something like that. But it's a light blue interior that is just so cool. It's got these tan accents. I mean, you're buying a luxury car. You're buying something that I don't have the pricing in front of me. It is not cheap. It feels every bit like a luxury car inside of there. And then yet it still can do all the stuff that a Jeep can do. They had us take not the Grand Wagoneer, but the Wagoneer on a little off-road thing. So you could, you got one wheel popped in the air as you're going over the sort of I always call them moguls. I don't know what you call them. I call them moguls. As you're going over those. Moguls. Okay. So and you get one wheel, a good 4 feet in the air, and inside the vehicle, you just feel a little bump, 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 bump. It doesn't on the outside. It looks terrifying.
It's a true Jeep.
Yeah, it's a Jeep. It is in every way a Jeep. Just a really beautifully well equipped. Okay, one of my favorite rando details that the interior designer shared with me at dinner. So on the wood dashboard, there's this piece that kind of divides it up, and it goes across the length of the dashboard. And in it says Grand Wagoneer in metal on the passenger side. And you look at it, and it almost looks like you'd think there would be thick letters that have been recessed somehow into the wood. No, he said it's actually so thin. It's like a tiny little thin wee little tiny piece of metal that sits on top of the wood. So it looks like it's set into the wood. It's just this tiny little thin piece of metal that says.
And it's beautiful wood too. It's an open pore wood.
Oh my God, it's
just
gorgeous.
Gorgeous.
The interior of this thing blew me away. I mean, it drives beautifully. It's got all the jeepiness. It has capability. What is it? I think the max tow rating is 10,000 pounds on this.
Up to 10,000 pounds.
Up to 10,000, depending on how you get it equipped.
You're right about the interior color. It's blue, they call it blue agave.
Oh my gosh, it is.
It is a fabulous color. It's
definitely a not for everyone color, but man, it makes this car feel like something truly, truly special. So I was a fan. I drove the Wagoneer and I drove the Grand Wagoneer. The Grand Wagoneer gets a little bit more beefier of an engine. You don't suddenly drive the Wagoneer and feel like, oh gosh, this isn't enough. You know, you get more out of the Grand Wagoneer, but it's not like you feel lacking in the Wagoneer. What'd you think, Sam?
Yeah, so I also really liked it. So as you said, you know, you get right now there's only V8 engines available in here. The standard Wagoneer has the 5.7 liter Hemi with about I think just shy of 400 horsepower. The Grand Wagoneer gets the 6.4 liter, which is I think 472 horsepower or something like that. When they showed the concept first last summer, I think August or September of last year, the Grand Wagoneer concept. They showed it then with the plug-in hybrid 4xe powertrain, and they declined to talk about that at all this week. You know, said we're not talking about anything like that this week. We're talking about what we're selling right now.
We can't comment on future product. Line, we cannot comment on future product. You know?
Yes. But it's coming. You know, I mean, they made it pretty clear during Stellantis's EV Day that plugins are coming to everything in the Jeep lineup in the next couple of years. My guess is we'll probably see the Grand Wagoneer 4xe probably by the end, close to either later in the 22 model year or at the beginning of the 23 model year. And the big question is, will it keep the 2-liter 4-cylinder that's in the Wrangler, or combine that with maybe a V6 or even a V8 engine? The V8 would be kind of interesting because now you're talking, you know, if they use the 6.4, they'd probably do the 5.7. So, you know, 400, you know, plus 100 horsepower. So you're looking, you know, over 500 horsepower easily from a plug-in hybrid V8 Grand Wagoneer, which would be an interesting combination. But, you know, this is a big vehicle. You know, it's not substantially bigger than, you know, an Escalade or Tahoe or Navigator standard wheelbase model. It's about 4 inches longer. But it was interesting that they chose to do the drive program from Manhattan. So we started off in the meatpacking district of Manhattan and drove out to Westchester County, went across the George Washington Bridge and out into Westchester and drove around some country roads out there, did some off-roading, had lunch, and then came back. And especially on the return trip, coming down the Henry Hudson Parkway into back into New York City, you realize, you know, that road, if you've never driven on it, it's I think 3 lanes on each side, basically a 6-lane highway, 3 lanes in each direction, and there's literally no shoulders, and the lanes are not particularly wide.
They are not.
And you know, in the center, if you're in the left-hand lane in the center, there's a Jersey barrier right there, so there's no shoulder. You know, you're basically up against a Jersey barrier, and you got traffic on the other side, and you feel the width of this vehicle. You know, you're constantly, you know, on the lookout to make sure that you're not scraping something on either side.
Yeah.
So it can be a little nerve-wracking in that kind of environment. I was surprised when they said, you know, that the New York area is actually the number one market in the country for SUVs and for Jeep. Which I guess, you know, when they talk about that, it's actually the New York metro area. So I think a lot of people who live outside of the city, you know, in Connecticut and, you know, Westchester County and Jersey and, you know, that whole region are driving these big SUVs. And of course, you do see a lot of big SUVs in the city in Manhattan as black cars. You know,
right.
A lot of Escalades, Navigators, that sort of thing, you know, being used as black cars. So as I said, it's a little nerve-wracking driving something that large in an environment like that. But when you get out in the country, even though these things weigh depending on the configuration, between 62 and 6,400 pounds curb weight, so we're talking a 3-ton SUV, it actually doesn't feel like it weighs 3 tons. It's surprisingly nimble feeling driving, on twisty back roads. And then of course there's the off-road capability. One thing that the Grand Wagoneer and the Wagoneer offer that you can't get on any of the GM or Ford full-size SUVs is a 2-speed transfer case. None of those other competitors have a 4-wheel drive low mode. With this one, with the Quadra Drive 2, they've got 3 different 4-wheel drive systems. There's the base Quadra Track 1, I think, and then Quadra Track 2, and then Quadra Drive 2. You can get up to a 48-to-1 crawl ratio, which, for comparison, the Wrangler, I think is the standard Wrangler. You can get up to a 78-to-1, and the new off-road package they just launched, with forget the name of it, is like 100-to-1 crawl ratio. So this thing can, assuming it'll physically fit, you can go places with a Wagoneer that you just can't go in any of those other full-size SUVs. Now, are you going to take your $100,000 luxury SUV into those kind of environments? Most people probably not. But maybe with the regular Wagoneer, yeah, you might just do that. This thing is.
I had an interesting conversation, dinner conversation with some of the folks at Jeep talking about that. Like, I get that what this does that you're not going to find in other SUVs like this is that off-road capability. You could do some crazy stuff in this if you wanted to, but are you going to do it in a car that is that expensive? And if you scrape those wheels, egads, that's a lot to replace those scraped wheels on your fancy car. Like, are you going to do this? And their sort of opinion was sort of like, well, you might not, but sometimes just knowing that you can. I mean, how many people buy a truck and never really use the capability of that truck? You're never hauling more than like a cup. Yeah, right? So you might not, but then you could. And if you wanted to, you could. And there's a certain sense of security in that. And also the luxury aspect on this. If you want a luxury car, but you don't want the sort of flash of the Escalade. Like someone sees an Escalade and you're like, oh, an Escalade. Everybody knows that's a fancy car, right? Escalade, it has a certain image. Like, Jeep has a totally different image. So you're like, oh, I went for this fancy Jeep. You're a different personality, a different person. So in terms of you
buy stuff from LL Bean.
Yes, yes, exactly. So you're sort of, it fits in with a lifestyle that's a little bit different. It's like, it's a little more rugged, a little more active, a little less concerned with looking super special and important, and more like, no, I want all that. I don't need to put it in your face, but I like the idea of the capability, and I do want a luxury car, but I don't want to drive an Escalade,
And, it's a very different luxury feel than you get in either the Escalade or the Navigator. The Navigator's got a more kind of traditional type of luxury feel to it. The new Escalade is a more modern luxury, for lack of a better term. And this thing kind of falls somewhere in between. It's very contemporary, but it also got some of that traditional feel to it. And I think it's a really nice balance of those, and then of course you've got all those screens everywhere. I think you can get up to 7 screens in this thing.
Yep.
If you get the rear seat entertainment package on the Grand Wagoneer. You've got 4 across the front because you've got the cluster in front of you, the digital cluster, the center infotainment display. Then there's another one down below, which has your climate controls at the bottom of the center stack, and that one can actually articulate up to open up.
Yeah, it's like a little door, so it
behind
flips up. That is so cool. It like flips up, poof, you have storage, comes back down, bing, you have a screen.
Right, and then the passenger screen, and then the 2 rear passenger entertainment screens, and then another one in the rear rear center console for the rear climate controls. So 7 different displays. There's USB ports everywhere. So if you need to plug stuff in, charge stuff, there's no shortage of USBs. There's 6 in the front row, a couple more in the back, and then more in the third row as well. And did you try sitting in the third row, Nicole?
I did. I actually climbed back, and It is, with, every single automaker says, oh, no, you can use our third row. It's easy to get to. You can sit back there. And then sometimes you're like, yeah, so no, right? You get in the third row of the Wagoneer and you think, oh, I can sit back here. And I actually there was someone at the event who was like 6'2", I think he said. So 6 foot plus. I had him do the sit in the front seat, adjust your seat, now sit in the second row, and now sit in the third. And you could have 6 foot people in there and you can still sit. It's not like suddenly like when you get a tall guy, it's like, well, now my knees are like shoved under my chin as I'm trying to sit back here. Oh no, spread out, get comfy. There's plenty of room in that thing.
As a tall guy, I can tell you we do ruin everything.
You do ruin everything, you tall. But you know what you won't ruin? You won't ruin the driving experience in the Jeep Grand Cherokee or Grand Wagoneer, because there's plenty of room for you.
And one of the things that really impressed me about this thing was, around, especially in Manhattan, but in that general area, a lot of the roads can be pretty rough. There's a lot of potholes, kind of uneven pavement, and the ride quality in this thing was shockingly good. You'll as you drive over, some of the frost heaves and things like that, you'll hear it. You'll hear a little thump, and you might feel a little bit, but there's the body stays remarkably stable relative to what the wheels are doing, and you don't really feel any head toss going around. And of course, in the Grand Wagoneer, you've got 24-way seats, front seats with massage capability, which I took advantage of. So yeah, I mean, I think that this thing is going to be really. I think it's going to be a really strong competitor to the other players in this market, and I think Jeep's going to have another winner on their hands with this one.
And
the pricing.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say the price right now at launch, they're only launching with 4-wheel drive models, no rear-wheel drive models. What's available now is the Series 2 4x4 starting at 71 as 1,500, so 72.5 for the Series 2 Wagoneer 4x4, going up to the Series 3 Grand Wagoneer, also 4x4 at just shy of $105,000. But there will be later in the model year 2-wheel drive models, starting with the Series 1 Wagoneer at 58, so 59 and a half, just shy of $60,000. And it's not cheap, but I think that this is going to be a really strong competitor in there. Oh, I just noticed
comparable to the rest of the rest of that market.
Yeah.
You know how we've talked about destination charges before, and
yes,
yeah.
$2,000, right?
Creeping up and using.
$2,000?
It's $2,000 destination charge on this one.
Oof. Yeah. It's funny. I had to write something up that had that on it. And I actually thought when I had to put that in the one story that I was running, I'm like, ooh, they're not going to like that on wheel bearings. $2,000. That's too high.
That's a lot of just like, what am I paying for this? Stuff.
But there was something else I wanted to relate, talking about the people who would like this and the appeal. Like, everybody knows what an Escalade is. Everybody knows some of these. And certain person, when I was coming out of the city on the start of the drive, it was very congested traffic. It was merging from 5 lanes to 1 because New York City, and very congested. And a trash truck, like a full-on City of New York trash truck, turns out and kind of turns directly in front of me, and I'm like, okay, I'll let him go. And the guy gives me like a thumbs up, and I'm like, did he just thank me for kind of sort of letting him in? Because that's the most not New York thing I've ever seen. But then we ended up next to each other in traffic. Right. I'm like, so I roll, he's like, roll down the window, I roll it down. And it's the guy driving this trash truck, and he says, what is that? What are you driving? I've never seen that. I was trying to figure out what that is. What is that? And when I told him what it is, he's like, that's amazing. Can you buy that? Is that out there? That is so cool. And it's just like random Joe driving a trash truck is like, sees this and recognizes it as something new and different and cool. And I thought, the number of outrageous expensive cars this guy probably sees driving through New York City in an average day, and the one that got him to like, hey lady, roll down your window, is the Jeep Grand Wagoneer. That says something about how it looks and the appeal this is going to have for people.
Cool. Oh, but you don't know, but like that, like a half mile later, he had somebody with a juke. He's like, roll down the window. What is that?
You're ruining my story, Roberto. Shush.
What did you think of the Macintosh audio system?
I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was really good. When we first got in, and you forget to do this in press cars. Somebody plays with it, and you're like, why does this all sound weird? And my drive partner's like, wait, they've messed with it. So he resets everything, and to like sort of like factory reset almost, put it all in the middle, and then play with it a little bit. It has fantastic sound. I mean, if you want that, the bass sound in that, I had my leg sort of was touching the side door, and I could feel like boom, 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 reverberating through the door against my leg. I thought the Macintosh sound system was incredible, but it does always make me think a little bit of Halloween because it's got green, and the logo comes up like kind of green, and it has that sort of typical Halloween font is just what Macintosh uses for their font. So I feel like Halloween, like every time I see that displayed.
I've done like reviews of like Macintosh, like I did their high end weird crazy turntable, and now all I can think about is Halloween. Which I don't think that's what they were going for, but now
I don't think that's what they're going for either. But I'm like, you should have picked a different font. Sorry, guys.
Yeah. But one of the things when they launched the concept again last summer, that is carried through now into the Grand Cherokee and in the Wagoneers, is the app that runs on the Uconnect 5 infotainment system. You can launch an app that gives you a simulated version of the signature Macintosh meters, the blue backlit meters. So you get a virtual version of those meters on your screen in the vehicle while you're driving. Yeah.
That was a big deal for them. I remember when they launched, they were like, look at this. And then it turns out like the color correction was wrong. They're like, don't use those photos. I was like,
No!
All right. Next up, while you were in Monterey, Robbie, you saw a new Lamborghini.
I saw a new old Lamborghini. I think that's the best way to describe it. I saw the brand new, but not really new. I saw the new, the new Countach. So the Countach is like the official supercar. Period. It's the supercar that everyone talks about. Especially anyone Gen X. For Gen X, we all owned. I think they handed them out as soon as you turned 5. Everyone who's Generation X got a Lamborghini Countach poster to put on your wall, and it stayed up there well into the 90s. It was the Countach. It set the bar for every Lamborghini introduced after it. It set the bar for the really like supercar design, and it's the 50th anniversary of that vehicle, and Lamborghini decided, hey, let's make a hybrid Countach, and they did, and they made 112 of them. And the reason
why 112?
Because that's the project number for the Countach when it was originally created. So they were trying to figure out like, well, how many should we make? We want to make a few because we don't want to like be the company that like resurrects old, brands. We want to look forward. That was like their whole thing. Is like, we want to keep looking forward. We don't want to like dwell on the past, but they felt like the Countach was such an iconic vehicle that they had to do something for its 50th anniversary, but they wanted to do something very, very small. And so they made 112. Actually, they made 113 because they have one. So 112 are sold to the masses. And then the one that was at Car Week.
The masses.
I know, the masses. And when I say masses, 112 people who've already purchased one. They all
That's
sold.
That's what I was going to ask. Did they sell them out already?
They're gone. They're gone. You're not. Yeah. They saw these cars a while back. They had to sign a bunch of NDAs. They had to throw down all the monies in the world.
How much is this? Do we know how much this is?
It's
I think 2.6 million.
Yeah.
2.6 million.
A lot. Yeah. It's especially
is a lot. All the money.
All the money. Yeah. So there's zero. So the one at Pebble Beach or at the Quail or Monterey Car Week, whatever you want to call it, the one they were showing off was 0. So that's Lamborghinis, and then there's 112 that have been sold to individuals, which means that the chances of any of us ever driving it are pretty much slim to nil. I couldn't sit in it. I wasn't allowed to sit when I was shooting video of it. I'm like, can I sit inside? They're like, no. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense because there's only one. And what if I have gum on my butt or something? And so what happened to that 2.8? Oh, we had to redo the upholstery because that
Roberto
idiot
sat out with gum on his butt.
Why would he have gum on his butt? But he did. Yeah, no, it is. I really appreciate how much it looks like the original Countach without being a carbon copy of that vehicle. I mean, there's regulatory issues you have to deal with that the original Countach didn't have to deal with. You know, it had to be taller. But you know, there's all these like little touches, like the original Countach concept vehicle in the front in the grille. It said Countach. Sorry, the dogs are going crazy.
The dog's excited about it. I mean, they want to see this car.
Yeah.
They're excited.
Shh. Hey.
Well, if I had that much money, which I don't, you know.
So the original concept vehicle in the grille, it said Countach, and then that didn't really go into production. But on this vehicle, they brought that back, and you know it doesn't have a wing, which I know a lot of us think when we think Countach, we think the big giant wing. But originally it didn't have a wing. They added that later, so it doesn't have a wing.
Yeah, that didn't come along till about 1980 or so.
Yeah, but everyone, like, that's the one everyone has on their wall. So it doesn't have the wing, but it has a lot of those sort of styling cues, those air vents on the doors that make it like a bit of a triangle, that sort of telescoping top roof where it sort of like comes down into a V. The flat lights in the front, it's like everything. You're just like, oh yeah, that's a Countach, and it looks
that's awesome.
So much better in person than it does in pictures. So if you've seen the pictures and you're just like, I don't know, it looks better in person. I saw the pictures, I was like, oh, this looks cool, and then you see it in person when they take everything off. We're like, oh, this looks much cooler than the photos. I think there are a bunch of cars that are sort of like that, where you're like, and then you see it in person, like, ooh. So if you're on the fence about it. You know, I don't know when you're going to see it in person, actually. At a car show. Go to a car show.
That's it. That's the only time you're ever going to see it is at a car show.
They'll drag out number 0, and you can check it out.
And it looks like it does have the little cover over the start button. You have to flip up, just like on the Urus.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at the photos.
Yeah, it's...
So I have to confess, you know, when I was a kid, you know, when I was growing up in the 1970s, I was not a fan of the Countach. I was part of the other group. So, you know, at that time there were two supercars. There was the Countach and the Ferrari 512 BB. And I was a Ferrari guy. I was not the Countach guy. And so I had posters of the Ferrari. In fact, I still have one. I still have a picture of a Ferrari 512 in my office. And that was my car, was the Ferrari 512 BB. And then I actually was a much bigger fan of the Lamborghini Urus, which was the predecessor to the Countach. I love that car. That thing was gorgeous. The Countach just never did it for me. But I do like this new one. I think it's a more sophisticated design in some respects. You know, it draws on the elements of the original, especially the like the 70s era Countaches before they put the fender flares on and the wing and everything. So the first generation of production Countaches, this one draws a lot more from those than from the later ones.
Yeah, I mean, I feel about you not being a fan of the Countach. I'm struggling to still podcast with you, but I'll get over it.
Yeah, I know. I think. I mean, the Urus is just an unbelievably beautiful eyelashy vehicle. But yeah, I think that Countach just really set the standard for everything else. And it's a hybrid, but it's a hybrid like the Sienna, so it has capacitors, super capacitors instead of a battery. It has even though it's like an LPI 800-4, so it's longitudinally, yeah. So the engine placement, I can never
longitudinally.
Yeah, that word. It placed
so is
engine.
the transmission in front of the engine?
I don't know. I didn't ask. It's pretty much whatever the Sienna has.
That was the thing about the V12, from the Countach up through the Aventador, they were always arranged with you had the V12 in the back, and then the engine was actually in front of the transmission was in front of the engine in the center tunnel. So you had an almost direct link from the shifter back when they still had actual shifters instead of this push button nonsense. You had an almost direct link to the transmission because it was literally under your elbow in those cars.
I'm curious, because so it has 800, so it's the 800, but it actually has and that's supposed to signify the power, but it actually has 814 horsepower, but 800, the 814 sounds weird. 800 sounds nice, and 531 pound-feet of torque. So when you give a Countach owner 814 horsepower and 531 pounds of torque, how long do you think it would take if it was a manual transmission? Like how many, I don't know, hours before they melted the clutch? Like 2? 1.5? 45 minutes?
Go an hour and 45 minutes. Let's go an hour and 45 minutes.
Yeah, it's just it's got a lot of power. 0 to 62 in 2.8 seconds because kilometers. It is it's a really pretty car. It's very expensive. None of us are going to be able to drive it unless Lamborghini later on says, you know what? Yeah, but you can drive it on a track and you can only go 5 miles. Well, let's make it 3 miles. You can go 3 miles in this vehicle. So that the new Countach.
And you can't get out of first gear.
And you can't. You do not. Do not touch anything. Don't do anything. Don't make things.
Do not cause any problems with our vehicle, please.
I feel like that was the big news of the show, of New York Auto Week, was the Countach. I know Audi had the Sky Sphere, and there was a new Bugatti, and there's some other things, but then there was also some news that came up after that.
Yeah, Acura made a little announcement as well
with drones.
It looked so cool.
Yeah, apparently. Yeah, so something that Acura fans have been clamoring for probably 20 years now, is the return of the Integra. The Integra is coming back next year, and they released a teaser image of it, and that's all. They're not telling us anything else right now, but they claim it will be true to the original. So, what do you think about an Integra coming back?
I think it's kind of cool. It was such an iconic car for Integra once upon a time. I mean, that's what everybody wanted. It was a big deal. So I think bringing it back.
Well, it was the original Acura.
Yeah, I mean, it was the thing. Another old car that Nicole Wakeland had. My husband's first car that he bought after he got married was, in fact, an Acura Integra, and he loved that thing. And he drove it until it was like, honey, it's done. You need to move on to something that still works. He drove it to death. But he loved that. So I think it's kind of neat. I think if they can capture some of the spirit of the original in whatever it is they decide to do with the new one, I think that could be kind of fun. But I don't know part of what made it neat, it was, like I said, the first Acura. It was, I don't know. I think it'll be neat. I'm excited for it. I think a lot of people who are a fan of that car are going to be excited to see it come back and to see what they do with it. And I think it could be good.
I as someone who owned a Civic and loved to have owned an Integra, I think when they came out, it was like the first Acura. It was very important for them, but it also sort of goes back to where Acura's trying to become that performance brand that it originally launched with. That sort of precision engineered. It started with the NSX a few years ago. Now we got Type S coming to everything apparently, and I think the Integra was one of those sort of missing elements from this sort of rebranding to being what they were originally. And I think I'm curious to see what they bring out, and I'm sure there's going to be a Type S version of it, and it's going to be cool. I hope. You always cross your fingers and hope it's something cool.
Yeah, when Honda launched the Civic Type R here in the U.S. a couple of years ago, I loved driving that car. I didn't necessarily love looking at it so much. I mean, for me, at my age, it was a little
stabby,
over the top, shall we say, in terms of styling. That wing. Although granted, from the driver's seat, you can't see the wing, because it's shaped so it's just above the the line of the rear glass. So when you look out the rear window, you don't see it at all. And that's what I tell people. It's like, just close your eyes, climb in the car, and then you can open your eyes and drive, and you don't have to worry about what it looks like. Just drive it and enjoy.
Just don't look.
And what I had always hoped was that they would do a replacement for the ILX, and basically put all the good mechanical bits of the Type R into a compact Acura, that was more restrained in its design. And hopefully that's what they come up with, with this Integra, is basically just drop all the Type R stuff into a compact sedan that you can drive without grabbing the attention of every police officer, driving down the road, and still be able to have a great time driving it. And I'll be curious to see what they do from a powertrain perspective. I mean, there is a new Civic Type R coming sometime, I think, in the early part of next year. And hopefully whatever they do to that goes into the Integra, and maybe even a little bit more. And it's just because when the Integra originally launched, Acura was a North America only brand, and everywhere else in the world the Integra was sold as a Honda, which is why it was the very first Type R was the Integra, and eventually Type R became a Honda only thing, and they did Type S for Acura. So I'm sure that whatever they do, the hot Integra is probably going to be a Type S rather than a Type R. But I'm really looking forward to seeing what they come up with. All right. One last story before we get into a couple of listener questions. Nissan is apparently considering a compact electric pickup truck, which I don't know about you, but I think it actually makes a lot of sense. If this compact pickup truck thing starts to take off with the Maverick and the Santa Cruz, Nissan's got their new EV platform that they're going to use for the Aria that's launching. Actually, it's going to be early in 2022 now. They pushed it back a few months. Using that as the basis for a pickup truck, I think would actually be really interesting. Have something that's smaller, more affordable than, say, a Lightning or a Rivian or a GMC Hummer for that matter. What do you think about that?
I think people are going to be excited about that idea. I think it's a neat direction for Nissan to go. And I do think this compact pickup truck segment is sort of taken off, between what we already have and the new stuff that we're getting that's a little bit smaller, like the Maverick. I think there's a lot of potential there. And I think people want to move towards EVs. The bigger pickup truck guys might be a little bit more nervous about it, with the idea that, if you're out there somewhere doing really trucky things, it can be hard to get your vehicle charged. But the compact pickup trucks, a lot of those aren't necessarily, you can go off-road on them, you can do that kind of stuff, but they're a lot more likely to find themselves less out there, where there's going to be a way to charge it and you're not, I think that makes having an EV a little bit more usable for compact pickup truck buyers. And I think Nissan doing that is a good idea. I'm curious to see what they're going to do with it. I think it's a positive move.
It kind of makes a bit more sense because, moving a pickup truck requires a lot of power, which means more battery. And battery adds more weight. And it's just this, you go round and round. To add more range, you need to add more weight. But if you add more weight, you need to add more battery to add more. And so I think the compact truck is sort of a really nice, it'll be a nice happy medium. I think they're definitely going to be keeping an eye on what's the Santa Cruz and the Maverick and see how those sell after the initial excitement of them. And I think if it ends up playing out as well as we think it will, because I think there is a genuine desire for smaller pickups, and not everyone needs something the size of a Manhattan studio apartment. So I think, and that would, to me I think that makes a lot more sense. The F-150 is the F-150. You can't, whatever, the F-150 Lightning's going to sell because it's the
right.
F-150. But for a lot of people, I think small pickup trucks make more sense, and a small pickup truck that's an EV, because you're not going to be doing, like you said, trucky truck things. It makes a lot of sense, and it'll be interesting to see if Nissan is the first to sort of come out the gate with a small EV.
What do you think, Sam?
Let's answer a couple of listeners.
Oh.
I agree totally. I think that, we talked earlier about, Nissan starting to do some more interesting things and being more competitive. And I think if they were the first ones to launch a compact electric pickup, I think that could be something that really sets them apart from the competition. Certainly, it sets them apart from Maverick and Santa Cruz. And I think that there's a lot of potential there. I think that could be a really cool product for them that I think will get some good attention. I think it'll get some customers. All right, let's answer some listener questions. First up, Brianna Wu asks, is yellow a great color for a sports car or a terrible color?
It's great. Anything that's colored like a Skittle is great on a sports car. It has to be that shocking green, that shocking orange, that shocking yellow. If it looks like a Skittle, it's acceptable in a sports car.
What's weird is that yellow. There's like a tiny little tint variant that immediately makes it look like a school bus or a taxi. As long as you get
orange, if it gets too orangey.
Yeah, if you can stay away from that and move towards the more yellow pearl, then it's outstanding. But you got to be very careful. I think there was a Cullinan someone was telling about that was yellow. It ended up looking like a taxi. Like someone spent a lot of money on a Rolls Royce.
Oops.
Got it yellow, and
I actually saw Cullinan in Manhattan for the first time.
Did it look like a taxi?
I've never seen
Strange
one
looking
in the
vehicle.
real world.
It's a big car. It's like driving it is like driving a locomotive. It's just like, here we go. Nothing's getting in our way.
I agree though. Anything bold colors on sports cars are great. I love. I have become so unbelievably bored with anything that's black, white, or some shade of silver and gray because they're everywhere. That more bold colors are needed. Whether it's yellow or green or orange, whatever. Just put it out there, and especially on a sports car.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Next up from I Am Nuisance on Twitter. I've been hoping to see a convertible BEV, a battery electric vehicle. I think it would be easier to do since you start with an electric skateboard that is stiff. Who do you think will be first to do it? Not an exotic. So who's going to build an electric convertible?
I am with I Am Nuisance. I really just want a convertible EV, and for the life of me, I cannot.
Who?
I can't. Because you have GM, but GM is not really a convertible, And then you have Hyundai. Hyundai's like pretty far out there with, they've never done a convertible. Mazda's behind everybody. Mazda, Toyota, and Honda are sort of lagging. So it's a tough one. I mean, Ford is coming up, but Ford maybe.
Ford's not doing sedans anymore.
Yeah, they're not even doing cars.
No,
Yeah.
but they are doing
doing
Mustangs.
Mustangs.
You could do.
But they have the Mach-E.
Mustang's their last car.
Mustang is the last car. So maybe we'll have.
So maybe that's it.
Like
Mustang.
A proper
It's going to be Mustang.
But not not a Mach-E, but actually a true Mustang.
Proper Mustang.
The next
Like
generation
proper,
Mustang is coming up.
A proper Mustang
And
that would be it.
Yeah.
And I think that they are going to do an electric Mustang, like a true Mustang coupe and a convertible. I think it's going to be Ford. I think later in the decade we will see Mazda do an electric Miata.
Oh yeah.
But I think the Mustang is probably going to be the first.
Yeah, I think that makes the most sense.
That makes sense.
Looking at everyone else, because everyone, if you're having to catch up, you're going to be going sport compact, SUV, because you need to get those numbers, and that's where the market is. And it's after you've already established yourself and you have the cars on the market, which Ford is already doing. I think the Mustang convertible sounds like the best. That's winner. If it's not that, then I don't know, Volkswagen something, the Taos.
Yeah, it could be. Could be maybe an ID3 convertible.
A Scirocco.
All right. Bring back the Scirocco one more time.
Bring back the Scirocco.
All right. Finally, Rachel Connolly asks, my 8-year-old son loves cars more than anything. He wants to know if there will ever be flying cars.
I have a lot of
What do
thoughts
you
on
think?
this.
Opinions.
I've written this article, and I think the article was at some point I just like there's no such thing as a flying car because people are trying to eVTOLs, which is essentially giant drones that people fly around in. They're just really really fancy helicopters with a lot of things in them. We cannot be trusted entirely to drive on the road. The idea of giving us the ability to now fly seems like a bad scene because when you wreck a car on the road, it's horrible, and you create there's potential for collateral within your area. If you mess up in the sky and you fall out of the sky, you're landing on houses. And the FFA, the Future Farmers of America are very the FAA. They keep track of the sky, and they're moving towards taking care, looking at VTOLs and seeing how those work. But we can't even fly drones in cities. Like, you can't fly a drone within, like, the city of San Francisco. You can't fly drones near airports. You can't fly drones. And those are just the tiny little drones. So imagine cars flying. I think the idea of the flying car it's fun, and we've always talked about it. And the Jetsons didn't really help us, like, think that it wouldn't happen. But I think at the end of the day, like, it's going to be those eVTOLs, those vertical takeoff and landing, giant drones that people get in and fly around from point A to point B. But even that's still a little bit of a ways off for most people because it's expensive. You got to build the infrastructure. You got to deal with the FAA. You can't be near airports because you're going to get in the way of actual giant jets. It's super complicated, and there's a reason why Uber sold their eVTOL business.
There's flying cars. There's a company that has now pretty much gone bankrupt, Terrafugia. They had a facility at the local airport in my town, which is a small airport, that they were approved for doing test flights and testing out. We were the first ones in the nation, I think, to officially make flying cars road legal. I don't know the rules around all of it, but we're the first ones going to New Hampshire. And then they pretty much laid everybody off and are done as of February of this year. So that was our brief moment of shining glory for flying cars, and they died. Yeah, I don't. And when you looked at what they had, it really just looked like a drone, a big drone that you could sit in. Like, yeah, I don't.
Their older stuff was more like a sort of car-like with folding wings.
Folding wings. Do you want to fly in something with folding wings unless it's like military grade?
I know. The idea of like
this is Bill. He's built 3 of these. He's got an engineering degree. It should be fine.
You have to like, how many hours do you have to train for your pilot's license? Like, it's an ungodly number of hours you train. What will we have to do to actually certify people to be okay in a flying car? I feel like the driver's ed version of flying cars is not going to be acceptable for people to put giant things over my head and flying through the air. So I don't know, maybe someday in the far distant future, but I don't see it happening anytime soon. I know I liked the Jetsons too. I feel bad for your kid, but yeah, no, I don't think so.
Yeah, sorry, dude.
Yeah.
I think anything that is capable of flying, by its nature inherently has to be designed as an aircraft first. So it's really an aircraft that happens to be able to maybe drive, as opposed to a flying car. So it's more of a driving plane than a flying car. And, these eVTOLs, I mean, these things are going to be air taxis. They're not going to be things that almost anybody owns.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to go buy an eVTOL. In most cases, most of these things are being designed to fly autonomously without even a pilot. Some of the early ones will have pilots, but these are aircraft. They're not cars. They may provide taxi-like services, but they're still not cars.
Because you can do that. So you can do a taxi with a helicopter right now.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yes, that's true.
We saw a whole bunch of them in Manhattan this week. Just picking up and dropping people off at the pier from our looking out my hotel room. So I'm coming in and out all the time. But they're, as you said, they're really expensive and they're noisy and they need dedicated infrastructure for landing and. We'll have air taxis, but unfortunately, I don't think we're ever really going to have true flying cars.
Just enjoy the car on the ground, and then when you want to go somewhere, you can get maybe in the future get an eVTOL, or right now you can just get a helicopter ride. You could just get a helicopter ride around somewhere.
Very second.
Yeah, you could just make friends with a guy who owns a helicopter, or just go to Manhattan or Hawaii or the Grand Canyon or whatever, and just get in a helicopter and enjoy the view.
For what it's worth, those eVTOLs should actually be potentially safer than traditional helicopters because you've got multiple motors, multiple rotors. You're not relying just on one engine and one rotor to keep that thing in the air. And so they should have a little more redundancy, and they should be safer. Certainly a lot more energy efficient. But, yeah, it's still a ways out there. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. See you guys next week. Talk to you next week.
Bye, everyone.